The transport shuddered as it docked with Axiom Prime, and Queen Isabella felt the artificial gravity shift beneath her feet. Through the viewport, the massive neutral station hung against the void like a jewel carved from starlight and steel. We had 40 minutes before the summit began. 40 minutes to prepare for a meeting that could decide whether humanity survived the next decade or burned in a war it didn't start. Her chief advisor, Commander Lucas Grant, stood at attention near the airlock. His jaw was tight, eyes scanning the docking bay beyond the reinforced glass. "Your Majesty, I must protest one final time. Walking into that chamber without armed escort is suicide. The Krell alone could crush you with one hand." Isabella adjusted the simple circlet on her brow, a thin band of platinum that caught the light. "If I bring soldiers, I'm admitting we're afraid." "Fear breeds contempt, Lucas. They already think we're children." "I won't prove them right. They invited you to this summit for a reason, and it isn't friendship." "No," Isabella agreed, her voice quiet but edged with steel. "It's because 3 colony worlds are ash, and someone wants to blame us for it." The airlock cycled open with a hiss of pressurization. Beyond it, the station's main corridor stretched wide enough to accommodate beings 3 times human size. The walls were lined with crystalline panels that pulsed with soft bioluminescence, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral Isabella couldn't identify. 2 station guards flanked the entrance, their species unrecognizable beneath ceremonial armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Isabella stepped through alone. Her gown was black, cut in the severe military style of Earth's unified government, with no decoration except the silver star over her heart. She had chosen it deliberately. Let them see a warrior, not a diplomat. The walk to the Chamber of Crowns took 8 minutes. Every step echoed. Isabella counted them, using the rhythm to steady her breathing and sharpen her focus. She passed viewing galleries where station personnel stopped to stare, their alien features unreadable. Word had clearly spread that a human was attending the summit. Some looked curious, most looked skeptical. The chamber doors rose before her like the gates of myth, 50 feet tall and carved from a single piece of dark stone that predated most civilizations in the galaxy. Inscriptions in a dead language spiraled across the surface. Isabella had studied them during the flight. They were a warning and a promise. Only truth spoken here. Only justice served. She wondered how many lies had been told behind those doors over the millennia. The guards at the entrance were living creatures this time. Members of the Vryn race with their distinctive triple-jointed limbs and faces like porcelain masks. They watched Isabella approach with eyes that glittered like cut gems. Neither moved to stop her, but neither opened the door. "Queen Isabella of Earth," she said clearly, "invited by the Galactic Council under emergency protocols." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the stone doors began to move, grinding inward with a sound like continents shifting. Light spilled out, golden and warm, and Isabella stepped into history. The Chamber of Crowns was circular, its walls rising into shadows, far above. 7 thrones were arranged in a perfect arc, each one crafted to suit its occupant's physiology. And on those thrones sat the rulers of the 7 most powerful empires in known space. Isabella recognized them from her briefings, but seeing them in person was different. They radiated presence, authority built over centuries or millennia of rule. At the center of the arc sat the Krell Emperor, a being nearly 9 feet tall, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that burned with inner fire. His throne was carved from a single massive bone, the skeleton of some creature extinct for 1,000 years. To his right perched the Vryn Empress, her form slight and graceful, wrapped in robes that seemed to shift between colors that had no names in human language. The Thane of the Coalescence hung suspended in a containment field to the left, its gaseous body constantly roiling with storms of thought and energy. The others were equally imposing. The Hive Matriarch, a chitinous being whose thoughts controlled 1 billion drones across 100 worlds. The Archon of the Crystal Dominion, a living sculpture of animate gemstone. The silent king of the Voidwalkers, whose species communicated through quantum entanglement and barely registered on human senses. And finally, the Sage Emperor of the Luminal Ascendancy, an ancient being whose race had achieved technological transcendence while humans were still painting on cave walls. An eighth throne had been placed at the edge of the ark, smaller than the others and noticeably cruder in construction. It was meant to be an insult, Isabella knew, a reminder that humanity was here on sufferance, not right. She walked to it without hesitation and remained standing. The Krell Emperor leaned forward, and when he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder. The human finally arrives. We have been waiting, though I confess I am uncertain why. Your species has existed for mere moments in galactic terms. You have nothing to contribute to this council. Isabella met his burning gaze without flinching. Then why was I invited? Because, the Vryn Empress said, her voice like wind through crystal chimes. 3 of our colony worlds have been reduced to cinders in the past standard month, and in each case human vessels were detected in the vicinity before the attacks. The chamber fell silent. Isabella felt the weight of 7 ancient stares upon her, measuring, judging, condemning. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral. This was the moment she had prepared for during the entire journey to Axiom Prime. I am aware of the accusations, Isabella said calmly. I'm also aware that correlation is not causation. Human ships travel along every major trade route in this sector. Our merchant fleet alone numbers in the thousands. The Hive matriarch's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or contempt. How convenient. Your vessels are everywhere, and yet you claim no responsibility when worlds die. I claim nothing except the right to see the evidence before judgment is pronounced. The Krell Emperor gestured with one massive hand, and the air in the center of the chamber shimmered. A holographic display materialized, showing star charts, sensor logs, and images of devastation that made Isabella's stomach turn. Entire continents blackened, oceans boiled away, cities that had stood for millennia reduced to glass and ash. The first attack occurred on Thessia Minor, the Sage Emperor said, his voice harmonious and ageless. A Vryn agricultural world. Population 14 million. Survivors, none. Sensor logs detected 3 human frigate-class vessels in orbit 6 hours before the bombardment began. The display shifted, showing a new world. The second attack destroyed Krellvash, an industrial hub of the Coalescence. Population, 9 million. Again, human ships were present, this time departing the system as the attack commenced. Another shift. The third and most recent attack annihilated Corvan, a Krell mining colony. 7 million dead. And once more, your species' vessels were the only foreign craft detected in the system. Isabella studied the data with forced calm, her mind racing through the details. Ship classifications, timestamps, orbital trajectories. Something was wrong with the pattern, but she couldn't quite grasp it yet. She needed more time, more information. These are serious accusations, Isabella said carefully, but they prove nothing. Anyone with access to human ship identification codes could falsify a sensor signature. The question you should be asking is not whether human ships were present, but whether humanity had any motive to commit these atrocities. The Archon's crystalline form chimed discordantly. Motive? Your species is expansionist, aggressive, and resource-hungry. You consume worlds as locusts consume crops. Every civilization in this chamber has watched your rapid, reckless growth with alarm. We have never attacked another sentient species without provocation, Isabella countered. Every conflict humanity has engaged in was defensive in nature. Defensive? The Krell Emperor repeated, his tone dripping with scorn. You paint yourselves as victims while your fleets multiply and your colonies spread like plague. Perhaps you grew tired of asking permission to expand. Perhaps you decided to take what you wanted and eliminate those who would oppose you. The other monarchs murmured agreement, and Isabella felt the mood in the chamber shifting towards something dangerous. She had expected hostility, but this was worse. This was coordinated. They had already decided humanity's guilt before she ever arrived. This summit wasn't about finding truth, it was about justifying the verdict they had already pronounced. If this council has already determined our guilt, Isabella said, her voice hardening, then why summon me at all? Why not simply attack Earth and be done with it? Because we are not barbarians. the Vryn Empress said coldly. "We offer you the chance to confess. Surrender the elements of your military responsible for these attacks. Submit to Galactic Council oversight of your expansion. Accept limitations on your fleet size and colonial ambitions. Do this, and perhaps your homeworld will be spared." Isabella felt ice crystallize in her veins. "You're asking us to surrender our sovereignty. We are offering you survival," the Krell Emperor said. "Your alternative is annihilation. 7 empires against 1 fledgling species. The war would last days, human, perhaps hours. And if I refuse, then you are complicit in genocide," the Sage Emperor said sadly, "and we will have no choice but to act accordingly." Isabella stood perfectly still, her mind working through possibilities at desperate speed. She couldn't fight them, couldn't bargain, couldn't retreat, but something about this entire situation felt orchestrated, artificial. These were ancient civilizations with billions of citizens and centuries of history. 3 destroyed colonies, tragic as they were, didn't justify threatening humanity with extermination. The reaction was disproportionate unless there was another agenda at play. Her eyes moved back to the holographic display, still hovering in the chamber's center. Ship classifications, timestamps, orbital trajectories. And suddenly, she saw it. The pattern that had been nagging at her subconscious finally crystallized into terrible clarity. The attacks weren't random. They were strategic. Each world destroyed belonged to a different empire, but they all shared one thing in common. They were remote, lightly defended, and economically significant. And the timing of the human ship departures wasn't suspicious. It was too perfect, too precisely calculated to create maximum suspicion while providing minimum actual evidence. This wasn't humanity's crime. This was a frame. Someone had orchestrated these attacks specifically to turn the galactic powers against Earth. But who would benefit from such a scheme? Isabella's gaze shifted from throne to throne, studying each monarch with new intensity. The Vryn Empress looked genuinely grieved over her lost colony. The Hive matriarch radiated cold fury. The Coalescence representative seemed more confused than angry, but the Krell Emperor sat perfectly still, his burning eyes fixed on Isabella, with an expression she couldn't quite read. And then she remembered something from her intelligence briefings. 3 months ago, the Krell had attempted to negotiate new territorial boundaries with the Vryn and the Coalescence. Both empires had refused, citing ancient treaties that limited Krell expansion into certain sectors. The negotiations had ended bitterly, with threats of future consequences. Isabella's pulse quickened. She looked at the holographic display again, this time focusing not on the human ship signatures, but on the weapons signatures from the attacks themselves. The briefing materials had included that data, but it had seemed irrelevant at the time. Now she pulled the details from her memory with razor focus. The bombardment patterns were consistent across all 3 attacks. Orbital strikes using plasma-based weapons, with a specific energy signature, and while dozens of species used plasma weapons, each civilization's technology had unique characteristics, like fingerprints. She needed to see the full weapons analysis, needed to confirm her suspicion. But the data in the current display was incomplete, showing only ship movements and aftermath assessments. "I request access to the complete sensor logs from all 3 attacks," Isabella said, her voice cutting through the chamber's hostile atmosphere, "including weapons signature analysis." The Krell Emperor's eyes narrowed. "You have already seen the evidence that matters." "I've seen edited highlights," Isabella corrected. "If you truly want justice, provide the complete data. Or are you afraid of what it might reveal?" "You dare question this council's integrity?" the Archon chimed, its crystalline body flashing with indignation. "I question anyone who asks me to accept guilt based on incomplete evidence," Isabella shot back. "You claim to be civilizations of law and reason. Prove it. Show me everything." The monarchs exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them in ways Isabella couldn't perceive. Finally, the Sage Emperor inclined his head slightly. "Very well. If it will satisfy your human need for thoroughness, you may examine the full logs. They will only confirm what we already know." The holographic display expanded, flooding with data. Terabytes of information scrolled past, faster than human eyes could follow. But Isabella had prepared for this possibility. She had spent the journey to Axiom Prime memorizing weapon signatures from every major galactic power. Now she scanned the bombardment analysis with desperate focus, searching for the specific pattern she suspected. There, buried in the technical specifications of the plasma weapons used in the attacks, the energy signature showed a distinctive harmonic resonance at precisely 217.4 terahertz. That frequency was characteristic of only one civilization's plasma generation technology, the Krell Empire. Isabella's blood went cold as the pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just a frame job. It was a coup disguised as a tragedy. Someone within the Krell military had orchestrated the attacks on their own colony, and two others, using weapons that could be traced back to the Krell, but disguising the attack vectors to implicate humanity. The goal was to unite the galactic powers against a common enemy, while simultaneously removing obstacles to Krell territorial expansion. But who in the Krell Empire would have the authority to order such attacks? Who would benefit from war with humanity and the chaos it would bring? Isabella looked up at the Krell Emperor, and in that moment, she saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't surprised by her scrutiny. He was waiting. This entire summit was theater, a performance designed to legitimize a war he had already decided to wage. Destroy humanity, blame them for the attacks, and in the resulting chaos, the Krell could expand into territories the Vryn and Coalescence could no longer defend. It was brilliant in its ruthlessness, and it would have worked if Isabella hadn't seen the weapons signature, but knowing the truth and proving it were different things. She had evidence, but it was technical, complex, and easily dismissible by those who didn't want to see it. The other monarchs were already predisposed to believe in humanity's guilt. Presenting them with terahertz harmonics and plasma resonance frequencies would accomplish nothing. She needed something more, something undeniable. Isabella made a decision that terrified her even as she committed to it. She had one card left to play, one piece of intelligence that could change everything. But using it would reveal just how deeply humanity's espionage networks had penetrated galactic civilization. It would make enemies. It would shatter the illusion of human weakness, but it would also save Earth. "I have seen enough," Isabella said, her voice quiet but carrying absolute certainty. "I know who destroyed those worlds, and it wasn't humanity." The chamber erupted with noise. Multiple monarchs spoke at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of alien languages and universal translators struggling to keep pace. The Krell Emperor rose from his throne, his massive form towering over the assembly. "Enough!" he roared, and the chamber fell silent. "I have tolerated your presence here out of courtesy, human, but you overstep. You will accept the Council's judgment or silence." Isabella spoke the word with such absolute command that even the Krell Emperor stopped mid-sentence, every eye in the chamber fixed on her, shocked into stillness by the sheer audacity of a human ordering ancient monarchs to be quiet. Isabella stepped forward into the center of the chamber, standing directly before the holographic display. Her heart was hammering, but her voice remained steady. "I invoked my right to speak. According to the protocols of this council, once that right is granted, I may not be interrupted until I yield the floor. So yes, Emperor, silence." The Krell Emperor's eyes blazed with fury, but he said nothing. The ancient rules of the Chamber of Crowns bound even him. Isabella took a breath and began. "You accused humanity based on ship signatures and circumstantial presence, but you ignored the most crucial evidence of all. The weapons used in these attacks. The plasma bombardment that destroyed 3 worlds carries a distinctive energy signature, a harmonic resonance at 217.4 terahertz. That signature is unique to Krell plasma generation technology." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Vryn Empress leaned forward, her gemstone eyes narrowing. "Krell technology is used by many species through trade and treaty. This proves nothing." "It proves the weapons were Krell in origin," Isabella countered. "But you're right that it doesn't identify the attackers. So let me provide additional evidence." 3 months ago, the Krell Empire attempted to renegotiate territorial boundaries with both the Vryn and the Coalescence. Both empires refused. The Krell delegation reportedly left those negotiations with threats of future consequences. The Krell Emperor's expression darkened. Diplomatic posturing is not evidence of genocide. No, Isabella agreed. But when that posturing is followed by attacks on Vryn and Coalescence colonies using Krell weapons, it becomes rather suggestive. Especially when the third attacked world was a Krell mining colony that happened to be the primary source of opposition to the Emperor's military expansion policies. That statement landed like a bomb. The other monarchs turned to stare at the Krell Emperor, their earlier hostility toward humanity transforming into suspicion of their fellow council member. "These are wild accusations from a desperate species," the Emperor said. But Isabella heard the slight edge in his voice now. "You have no proof of Krell involvement, don't I?" Isabella reached into her gown and withdrew a small data crystal, holding it up so the light caught its facets. "This contains a message transmitted from the Krell warship Devastation's Edge to the Krell military command fortress on Krell Prime. The transmission is encrypted using Krell military cipher protocols that were supposed to be unbreakable. It was sent 6 hours before the attack on Corvan. The chamber went deathly still. The message," Isabella continued, "contains detailed coordinates for the Corvan attack, confirmation of weapon deployment, and explicit orders to ensure human ship signatures were detected in the system. It also references previous successful operations on Thessia Minor and Krellvash." She held up the crystal higher. "The message concludes with a request for further orders regarding the expansion into Vryn space once the humans have been eliminated and the Vryn are too weakened by their losses to resist." The Krell Emperor's hand moved toward his throne's armrest where, Isabella knew from her intelligence reports, a personal shield generator was concealed. But before he could activate it, the Vryn Empress spoke, her voice colder than Isabella had yet heard it. "If this evidence is authentic, Emperor, you will answer for it, here and now." "The human could have fabricated this entire message," the Emperor said, but there was desperation creeping into his tone now. "There is no way they could have broken Krell military encryption." "Actually," Isabella said quietly, "humanity broke your encryption 8 months ago. We've been monitoring Krell military communications ever since. We said nothing because we believed in the value of peaceful coexistence. We hoped we were wrong about your expansionist ambitions." She looked around at the assembled monarchs, seeing their shock, their reevaluation of humanity's capabilities playing across alien features. "We are not the primitive children you believed us to be. We have been listening, learning, and preparing. We knew this day might come. We just didn't expect you to be quite this bold." The sage Emperor extended a shimmering appendage. "Provide the crystal for authentication." Isabella walked forward and placed it in a neutral analysis terminal that rose from the chamber floor. The device hummed, running verification protocols that checked for digital forgery, temporal consistency, and encryption authenticity. The seconds stretched like hours. Finally, the terminal chimed. A synthesized voice filled the chamber. "Data authenticated. Encryption verified as Krell military standard. Temporal markers consistent with stated transmission time. Probability of forgery? 0.003%. The verdict hung in the air like an executioner's blade. The Krell Emperor moved then, finally triggering his shield generator and reaching for what Isabella assumed was a weapon. But his own honor guard, standing in the shadows behind his throne, stepped forward instead of defending him. Their energy pikes crossed in front of their emperor, barring his path. "By the codes of honor," the lead guard said in a voice like grinding stone, "we cannot serve one who brings shame to the throne. The evidence is clear. You orchestrated murder and framed the innocent. You disgraced the Empire." The Emperor stared at his own soldiers in disbelief. Then his shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him as he realized the totality of his defeat. "I did what was necessary," he said quietly. "The Krell need room to expand. The old treaties strangle us, and humanity was growing too powerful, too quickly. They needed to be eliminated before they became a true threat. So you massacred your own people," the Hive matriarch said, her voice vibrating with barely contained rage. You destroyed colonies, killed millions, all to justify a war of conquest. I would have given the Empire a future, the Emperor said. Instead, I will give it shame. The Vryn Empress stood, and one by one the other monarchs followed. You will be taken into custody pending trial under galactic law, she said. Your empire will answer for these crimes. And humanity. She turned to Isabella, and for the first time since entering the chamber, Isabella saw something like respect in those alien eyes. Humanity has proven itself worthy of a place in this council. You came here alone, faced accusations that would have destroyed most civilizations, and revealed a conspiracy that threatened us all. You have earned our acknowledgment. The Vryn Empress bowed. It was a slight inclination of her head, barely perceptible, but in the context of galactic diplomacy it was profound. And then, incredibly, the other monarchs followed suit. The Hive Matriarch, the Archon, the Sage Emperor, even the Silent King in his own way. They all acknowledged humanity's sovereignty and worth. Isabella stood perfectly still, afraid that if she moved, the moment would shatter like glass. She had come to this summit expecting to defend Earth against impossible accusations. Instead, she had exposed a conspiracy, prevented a galactic war, and secured humanity's place among the stars. But the victory felt hollow. 23 million people were still dead. Worlds were still burning. And she had just revealed capabilities that would make humanity both respected and feared in equal measure. The Krell Emperor was escorted from the chamber by his former guards. His reign ended in disgrace. The other monarchs began to disperse, already discussing the political aftermath and how to prevent such a conspiracy from ever occurring again. The Vryn Empress approached Isabella before departing. You could have kept your intelligence capabilities secret, she said quietly. Revealed just enough to cast doubt, without showing how deeply you had penetrated our systems. Why risk making enemies by showing your true strength? Isabella met her gaze steadily. Because half-truths breed suspicion, and suspicion breeds conflict. I would rather be respected for what we are, than feared for what we might be hiding. Humanity wants partnership, not dominance. But we will defend ourselves and those who cannot defend themselves. The Empress studied her for a long moment. Your species may be young, Queen Isabella, but you are not foolish. That gives me hope. She paused at the chamber doors. We will speak again soon. There is much to discuss about humanity's role in galactic affairs. Then she was gone, and Isabella was alone in the Chamber of Crowns, except for the station attendants beginning to dim the lights. Commander Grant found her there 10 minutes later, still standing before the empty thrones. Your Majesty, he said softly, the transport is ready to depart whenever you are. Isabella nodded but didn't move immediately. She was thinking about the Krell Emperor's words. Humanity was growing too powerful, too quickly. That was what had really motivated the conspiracy. Not territorial ambition alone, but fear of what humans might become. And now every civilization in the galaxy knew that humans could break their encryptions, infiltrate their systems, and operate intelligence networks sophisticated enough to expose conspiracies at the highest levels. They knew humanity was not to be underestimated or dismissed. That knowledge would change everything. Some empires would seek alliance with Earth, wanting to harness human innovation. Others would see humanity as a threat to be contained or eliminated. The balance of galactic power had shifted today, and Isabella wasn't certain whether she had made the situation better or worse. Lucas, she said finally, when we return to Earth, I need you to assemble the Security Council. We need to prepare for what comes next. War, he asked quietly. Respect, Isabella corrected, which is sometimes more dangerous than war. The Krell Emperor was right about one thing. Humanity is growing powerful, and power without wisdom leads to the same arrogance we saw in him. She turned to face her advisor, and he saw the weight of the day in her eyes. We have to be better than that. We have to prove we deserve our place among the stars, not just claim it. They walked together toward the transport, leaving the Chamber of Crowns behind. As the airlock sealed and the ship prepared for departure, Isabella took one last look at Axiom Prime through the viewport. Somewhere on that station, discussions were happening that would reshape galactic politics for generations. Humanity's name would be spoken in those conversations with respect now. But respect, Isabella knew, was not the same as trust. That would have to be earned through actions, not words. Through decades of proving that humanity could be both powerful and principled. The transport pulled away from the station, engines firing as it began the long journey home. Isabella settled into her seat and closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of exhaustion after hours of unrelenting tension. She had commanded silence in a room full of ancient monarchs, exposed a conspiracy that threatened billions of lives, and secured Earth's place in galactic affairs. It was, by any measure, a successful diplomatic mission. But the real work, she knew, was only beginning. Today she had proven humanity deserved a seat at the table. Tomorrow, she would have to prove they deserved to stay there. The stars streamed past the viewport as the transport accelerated toward Earth, carrying a queen who had spoken with absolute authority to the most powerful beings in the galaxy and made them listen.